The air in the valley didn't just carry the scent of dry sage and heated dust. It carried the metallic tang of impending violence that only those who have lived on the edge of the wire truly understand. Elena Vance stood in the shadow of the communications hut, her breath hitching as the first mortar round whistled through the atmosphere, a sound like tearing silk that ended in a bone-jarring crump. Within seconds, the serene silence of the remote Joint Operations Base was shattered by the rhythmic, terrifying stutter of heavy machine gun fire. This was not supposed to happen here. This was a transition site, a place where families were briefly reunited with their operators before the final stretch of a long deployment. Elena looked toward the perimeter where the smoke was rising, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her husband, Jax, a seasoned Navy SEAL, was already a mile outside the wire on a snap reaction patrol, lured away by what everyone now realized was a calculated feint. The base was understaffed, the primary sentries were pinned down, and a coordinated insurgent force was pouring over the eastern ridge with the intent to erase everything in their path. In that moment of absolute chaos, when the world turned to fire and the men tasked with protection were falling, a fundamental question hung in the smoke-choked air. When the professional warriors are gone and the wolves are at the door, who do we become to protect the ones we love? Does the title of spouse end where the battlefield begins? Or is there a dormant strength within the silent ranks that the enemy has fatally underestimated? Elena's life had always been defined by the quiet spaces between the loud moments of her husband's career. As a Navy SEAL wife, she had mastered the art of this silent vigil, the ability to maintain a household, a career, and a sense of normalcy while the man she loved was a ghost in a foreign land. But Elena was not merely a bystander to the culture of excellence that defined the teams. She was the daughter of a legendary Marine Scout sniper, a man who had raised her on the principles of ballistics, windage, and the stoic philosophy of the long-range marksman. While other children played with dolls, Elena had been taught the physics of a cold-bore shot and the discipline of controlled breathing. She had chosen a civilian life, becoming a high-end architectural photographer, but the muscle memory of the rifle had never truly left her. On this particular morning at Camp Sentinel, the sun had risen with a deceptive gold hue. Elena had been enjoying a rare cup of coffee with other spouses, talking about mundane things like school districts and upcoming leave. The base was a temporary haven, a green zone tucked into a rugged canyon that felt safe because of the mountains surrounding it. However, the mountains were now speaking in the language of lead. As the sirens began to wail, a sound that pierced through the sensory overload of the explosions, Elena didn't scream. Instead, a cold, familiar clarity began to settle over her. She watched as a young corporal, barely 20 years old, was struck down near the armory door. The perimeter was collapsing, and the insurgents were moving with a tactical precision that suggested they knew exactly how thin the base's defenses were. She saw the fear in the eyes of the other women huddled in the reinforced cafeteria, and she realized that if someone didn't change the geometry of this fight, no one was going home. The discipline her father had drilled into her, the idea that the weapon is an extension of the will, surfaced from the depths of her subconscious. She didn't think about the legality or the impossibility of what she was about to do. She only thought about the gap in the line and the monsters filling it. She slipped out of the cafeteria, staying low, moving with a predatory grace she hadn't used in a decade. The journey across the open courtyard to the primary watchtower was a gauntlet of fire. Elena pressed her back against the corrugated metal of a supply shed, feeling the heat of the sun-baked steel through her shirt. She could hear the distinct, heavy thud of an RPD machine gun from the ridge, a sound that was suppressing the few remaining guards at the main gate. The insurgents were using a classic hammer and anvil tactic, pinning the defenders down with heavy fire while a maneuver element moved through the dry creek bed to breach the north wall. Elena knew that if they reached the wall, the base would be lost in a matter of minutes. She reached the base of the tower and found a fallen sentry, a young man she had seen in the mess hall just hours before. Beside him lay a MK-13 Mod 7 sniper rifle, its bolt-action mechanism coated in a fine layer of dust, but otherwise pristine. It was a heavy, intimidating piece of machinery, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, a caliber she knew well. Her hands shook for a fleeting second as she reached for the weapon, not out of fear of the gun, but out of the gravity of the threshold she was crossing. Once she picked up this rifle, she was no longer a civilian. She was a participant in the oldest and most terrible of human endeavors. She slung the rifle and began to climb the ladder, her lungs burning as smoke from a burning Humvee drifted into the tower. When she reached the crow's nest, she found the optics were still clear. She took a moment to observe the battlefield, not as a victim, but as a predator. She saw the muzzle flashes on the ridge, 3 distinct positions. They were high up, nearly 600 yards away, raining hell onto the courtyard. The defenders below couldn't see them through the dust, but from her elevated position, Elena had a clear line of sight. She felt the weight of the rifle's stock against her shoulder, the coldness of the cheek rest, and the familiar click of the safety being disengaged. Leadership is often defined by those who hold a rank, but in the crucible of combat, leadership is simply the act of doing what must be done when others cannot. Elena adjusted the bipod on the ledge of the tower, her mind racing through the calculations her father had made her memorize as a teenager. The wind was blowing left to right at about 10 miles per hour, gusting through the canyon gaps. She dialed the turret on the Night Force scope, her fingers moving with a mechanical precision that surprised her. She wasn't thinking about Jax, or her home, or the terrifying reality that she was about to take a life. She was thinking about the data on previous engagements and the atmospheric pressure. She found the first target in her crosshairs, an insurgent behind a heavy DSHK machine gun that was currently shredding the roof of the infirmary. He was confident, standing tall because he believed he was out of range of any effective small arms fire from the base. Elena took a deep, rhythmic breath, filling her lungs and then letting half of it out, holding it at the natural respiratory pause. The world narrowed down to the fine black lines of the reticle. She squeezed the trigger, not a jerk, but a steady, rearward pressure. The rifle barked, a thunderous roar that sent a shock wave through the small tower, and the recoil pushed firmly into her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the insurgent collapse. There was no celebration, only the immediate realization that she had just revealed her position. She didn't wait. She worked the bolt, the heavy brass casing spinning away and clattering on the metal floor. She transitioned to the second target, a spotter who was frantically trying to figure out where the shot had come from. She accounted for the slight shift in wind and fired again. The second man fell. Down in the courtyard, the soldiers who had been pinned down heard the distinct, rhythmic cracks of the bolt-action rifle from the tower. They didn't know who was up there, but they felt the pressure on them ease instantly. The psychological impact of a sniper is often more devastating than the physical one. As Elena continued to fire, the insurgent advance slowed to a crawl. They had expected a chaotic, disorganized defense, but they were now facing a surgical precision that seemed to come from the sky itself. Elena moved her position within the tower, shifting to a different window to avoid being targeted by a rocket-propelled grenade. She was learning the rhythm of the battle, the way the enemy moved in bursts of 3, the way they used the shadows of the rocks. She felt a strange, detached sense of resilience. Every time she chambered a new round, she was reclaiming a piece of the safety that had been stolen from her. She saw a group of 4 insurgents attempting to plant an explosive charge at the base of the north wall. They were moving fast, using a smoke grenade for cover. Elena didn't aim for the men. She aimed for the path they had to take, predicting their movement through the haze. She fired, hitting the lead man in the thigh, causing him to stumble and drop the charge. His comrades scrambled to recover him, and Elena used that moment to suppress the entire group, pinning them behind a low stone wall. Her shoulder was beginning to bruise from the heavy recoil, and the heat in the tower was becoming unbearable, but she didn't waver. She thought about the teamwork required to keep a base like this running. The mechanics, the cooks, the wives, the operators, all of them links in a chain. She was the link that refused to snap. She realized then that military values weren't just for those in uniform. They were a set of principles for living. Perseverance wasn't just about enduring pain. It was about maintaining a high level of performance while in pain. She kept her eyes glued to the glass, her focus so absolute that the sounds of the battle around her began to fade into a dull hum, leaving only the target and the wind. Miles away, Jax Vance and his team heard the frantic radio transmissions coming from Camp Sentinel. They had realized the ambush was a diversion too late and were now racing back in their strikers, the engines screaming at their limits. Jack sat in the back, his jaw clenched, his mind racing through every nightmare scenario. He knew Elena was there. He knew the base's security was compromised. When they finally rounded the last bend in the canyon and the base came into view, he expected to see a charred ruin. Instead, he saw a coordinated defense. He saw the insurgents being picked off every time they tried to mount an assault. He looked up at the main watchtower and saw the flash of a long-range rifle. He knew that rifle. It was the Mk-13, a weapon usually reserved for the most elite marksmen. As the SEALs dismounted and began their counterattack, moving with the devastating speed and violence they were famous for, Jax found himself looking at the ghost sniper in the tower who was providing them with perfect overwatch. Elena saw the strikers arrive, the familiar tan vehicles kicking up massive clouds of dust. She didn't stop. She stayed on the glass, identifying targets for the returning SEALs. Using a small signal mirror she found in the tower to flash the location of an enemy mortar team hidden in a cave mouth. The synergy between her elevated precision and the SEALs' ground assault was a masterclass in tactical integration. The insurgents, caught between a relentless ground force and an unseen angel of death in the tower, finally broke. They began a disorganized retreat into the mountains. Elena watched them go through her scope, her finger resting on the trigger, but she didn't fire. The threat was neutralized. The immediate danger to the families, to her friends, and to her husband was over. Only then did the adrenaline begin to dump from her system, leaving her hands trembling so violently she had to grip the ledge to stay upright. When the dust finally settled and the all clear was signaled, the base was a scene of grim activity. Medics moved through the courtyard, and the smell of fire was replaced by the acrid scent of extinguished flares. Jax ran toward the tower, his boots thudding on the metal stairs as he climbed 3 steps at a time. When he reached the top, he stopped dead. He saw Elena sitting on the floor, the heavy sniper rifle lying across her lap, her face streaked with soot and her eyes wide with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen the abyss. He didn't say a word. He simply knelt and pulled her into his chest, his tactical gear clanking against her. The other SEALs who followed him up stood in the doorway, their expressions a mix of shock and profound respect. They were men who lived by the code of the warrior, and they recognized that the woman before them had just saved their lives and the lives of everyone they cared about. In the days that followed, the story of the SEAL wife of Camp Sentinel became a legend within the community, but Elena didn't want the fame. She didn't want a medal. She went back to her photography, back to the quiet life, but she was different. She had learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the realization that something else is more important than that fear. She had shown that the strength of the military family isn't just in their ability to wait, but in their ability to stand. The experience had forged a new kind of resilience in her, a quiet confidence that no matter how dark the world became, she had the light within her to find the way. She had transitioned from being a supporter of warriors to being a warrior in her own right, proving that the heart of a defender doesn't require a uniform, only a purpose. Elena Vance's journey from a civilian spouse to the savior of Camp Sentinel serves as a powerful reminder of the hidden depths within the human spirit. Her story is not just one of a woman picking up a rifle. It is a testament to the discipline, sacrifice, and unbreakable courage that defines the entire military community. She demonstrated that military values, leadership, teamwork, and extreme ownership are not confined to those who wear the stripes, but are available to anyone with the will to embody them. Elena's actions that day did more than just stop an ambush. They redefined what it means to be a partner in the most dangerous of professions. She showed that while the warriors go forward to face the enemy, the ones they leave behind are more than just shadows. They are the bedrock of the nation's defense, capable of extraordinary feats when the moment demands it. Her story represents the silent ranks, the thousands of spouses and family members who carry the weight of service every single day. It reminds us that bravery is often found in the most unexpected places, and that love, when pushed to the brink, can become the most formidable weapon of all. As we reflect on her courage, let us remember that the strength of our military is not just in its technology or its training, but in the character of the people who call it home. Elena Vance didn't seek the battlefield, but when the battlefield came to her, she met it with a steady hand and a focused heart, leaving behind a legacy of inspiration for all who face their own ambushes in life. Her story is a call to all of us to find that inner strength, to prepare for the moments that matter, and to never underestimate the power of a person standing for what they love.